All right, welcome everyone. Back to another AU Core Technical Design Group call on this fine September, where we're going to continue doing ballot reconciliation. What we're going to do to start off with is an acknowledgement of country, and we acknowledge the custodians of the traditional lands on which we all gather today. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. I'm coming to you for today from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people. Our agenda for today is really all around ballot reconciliation. There's going to be some usual business that we always go through around minutes, look at any actions that might have been done from the last meeting, and there weren't any, so we won't go through those. And also updates and news, including from the recent clinical design group meeting that went over 2 days. So we've got Kylie in here to give us a little bit of an update on what would be relevant to our technical design group. And then we're going to go into ballot reconciliation. And the topics that or rather the feedback items for vote were sent round to this group before this one. So we're going to go through those, and then we'll just cover off what and when our next meeting is. So first up is usual business, which is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Now, those were emailed round, but I'm going to just go to them and just do a quick scroll for that. But does anyone need more time to review these before we approve them? For attendees, we have the slides, and this captures the decisions taken from our last set of ballot reconciliation decisions in the previous meeting. All right, I'm not hearing from anyone that we need more time to review that before approving. So is someone happy to motion approval of those minutes?
I'm happy to, Dushi.
Thanks, Dushi. Is anyone happy to second?
I'm happy to second, Jamie.
All right, we'll go with Jamie as the seconder. And now I'll just put up the meeting poll for approval of the minutes. So that should come up now. If this is your first meeting, then please select abstain, or if you weren't at that previous meeting, please do so as well. Otherwise, please vote affirmative or negative if you don't approve the minutes and we need to take further action on them. Okay, just get a countdown now from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll end that poll and I'll share the results. So that motion is passed. We have 19 affirmative, there are 0 negative, and 23 have abstained. Stop sharing. Okay, so let's go updates and news. So there's a few pieces here. One of which I wanted to draw people's attention to is that, oops, that says IPS twice. My bad. That should actually say, let's edit that, IPA. So both International Patient Access, being the international standard for patient and provider apps for access to data, and also International Patient Summary have just gone through for comment, or in IPS's case, a ballot. And that period is closed. A number of Australians have provided feedback into those. And so the groups that look after them, in fact, both of these are looked after by the Patient Care work group, HL7 International. I think someone just might need to go on mute. These have now closed, and so the project teams for IPA and the project team for IPS will now be working through those, and we'll see what updates, if any, come through, and if any of those are relevant for us to consider for AU Core. And otherwise, now we'll go through some of the updates and outcomes from the recent CDG meeting before I provide an update on the AU patient summary project proposal. So I'll hand over to you, Kylie, just tell me when to move slides.
Thanks, Danielle. So just a quick update. Last week, and I can't believe it was only 1 week ago, we held a 2-day clinical design group in Brisbane up here. There was over 120, close to 130 people, so it was our biggest one yet. And we, of course, had lots of worksheets and sticky dots and the whole bit. And we also had a whole bunch of speakers, and we're really focusing on AUCDI R2 and e-requesting from a national terminology catalogue point of view. Next slide, please. So in terms of the AUCDI-R2, we're really driven by those topics that were kind of given to us, which was patient summary, chronic disease management or shared care coordination, and reason for encounter. So what we got the group to do is just help us understand what their use cases are, what's the current landscape, thinking about what is there currently being done, what is the existing data collection kind of looking like, and getting the group to start thinking about what could a first release of an AU patient summary from a clinical point of view, considering the feasibility of it, like looking at existing data, what does it mean? Thinking still for us about core of the core, and also thinking about the data that is already collected or not collected. We also wanted to understand their data requirements. So we kind of took them through a few exercises with patient summary, but also chronic disease management and for reason for encounter. So we got the group to think about all of these things from, like, we had groups tables of maybe about 8 or 10 people, each of the groups kind of thinking it from their point of view, what does it look like, and then doing a little kind of voting thing. Next slide too, Danielle. For e-requesting the national terminology catalogues, we presented an example visualization of the data model, so the AU e-request EI, as well as the national e-request, which was a national e-requesting terminology in the contents of a CSIRO Smart on Fire form component. So I was just really trying to help visualize what it could possibly look like when you are doing a test selection and getting the clinicians to like try and understand the terminology a little in a less abstract sort of way, and to also then consider the benefits, challenges, opportunities, and risks of nationally standardized terminology catalogues, and also consider the support that was needed to adopt that. So whether it was from the government, from industry, from peaks bodies, thinking about the change management and the education and funding and all of the things that kind of sit around that. Next slide, please. So we are now currently collating that information. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came out, which was really amazing. We will put those on the website, I'm hoping in the next week, but I'm saying week or so, just to give me a little bit of time. We will be presenting some of the viewpoints and things. We'll have some speakers who spoke at the event to kind of give us a recap at the next Sparked webinar on the 2nd of October. And we will bring it back to our next CDG on the 15th October for further discussions. But once we kind of collate that and bring all the results together, I'm happy to come back and present the outcomes to the 2 DDGs, so the core stuff to go, the patient summary type stuff to go to core, but also an AUCDI R2, but also the e-requesting stuff to the e-requesting TDG when that's available. And I think that's all I had. Danielle, was there anything else you wanted me to raise here?
I don't particularly think so. I mean, the timeframes for AUCDI R2 are still what was, I guess, projected, which is, I think, February next year. Is that right?
Yeah, we're still looking to publish that draft for comment for AUCDI R2 for February next year, to be published at June again. But we do want to kind of firm up the scope really soon, definitely before November, so that it gives you guys something to work off as well. But yeah, so we will be working on that really intensely over the next couple of weeks.
So is it likely that there would be enough of the outcomes put together to make it worth coming back to the next meeting for the AU Core Technical Design Group, which is in a fortnight, or would it be more like the one after that, do you think?
Is the next one is it every 2 weeks? So 2
Yes.
weeks. I would like to come back in 2 weeks if I can. If I have something worthwhile, I'll definitely come back then. So maybe pencil me in, because I think it's probably worthwhile just sharing, even if it's early thoughts, I can bring those to the group.
Okay, that sounds really good. Does anyone else have any questions or anything that they want to comment on about either AUCDI or R2 or what, I guess, the clinical group workshops? Yes, we've got a head up from Parker.
Thanks. It's just Greg. I'm sort of wearing my Advanced Care Planning Australia. Just a note about consistent terminology. I just noted in that document you just shared, they talk about advanced care directives, and I think we're working very strongly with the Digital Health Agency and a number of stakeholders to get the terminology right. I can add it in the chat, but it's advanced care planning. So
Yeah.
just please to make note of, and I'm happy to have a conversation out of session too.
No, I think it was definitely noted. So I think anything going forward will be advanced no D care directives.
And care planning rather than directives. Directives is a subcategory of advanced care planning.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
you could
you.
make note of that. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Parker. Does anyone else have a question or something they want to comment on? All right. So thanks, Kylie. We look forward to hopefully seeing you in a fortnight with some of the outcomes.
Sounds good. Thanks, Danielle.
No worries. So let's do an update on the AU patient summary project proposal. There has been an initial one for HL7 Australia, noting this is related to where those future directed pieces of work around reason for encounter, around chronic disease management, and around patient summary being undertaken and looked at in SPART, with patient summary intended to be a fire IG. And so there's a project proposal to have a new HL7 Australia patient summary fire implementation guide, and to put together a project team to do that underneath both the fire work group and the AU Core Technical Design Group. We are still looking for participants, and this isn't the last call for that. If you are working on one, or you already have a patient summary implementation, and you are keen to be involved in the development of this, please sign up to be a project team member. We've got the links there. The slides are on the website, and that's also a QR code to go to that on where you can add your name. In terms of updates on where the project proposal with HL7 Australia is at, it's in the early going through the approval stages. So the draft project proposal has been provided to the firework group for socialisation, and also opened up for feedback. And a couple of pieces of feedback have come through now. And so I've just popped that piece of feedback there on the left. Here's the feedback that's come through on the project proposal. And at the next firework group, and everyone is welcome to join, the proposal feedback and hopefully approval of that project proposal will be discussed in the next firework group. So that's the date and time and the Zoom link there. That is an open Zoom call. I just wanted to raise, because I think it's really quite meaningful, that feedback that's come through on, especially the first point on that it's a little bit confusing having these things called work groups and these things called technical design groups and these things called projects. And so I wanted to just link off to a couple of the images and how HL7 works, of which we're an affiliate, and we're putting together those products, and so we follow overall those processes. But in Australia, we also have technical design groups that sit under work groups. And if people are interested to do so, I thought I'd do a quick run through of the page, or at least the links are in the slide, if you want to see what that works. And here's sort of an image of that now, looking at where the overall kind of grouping of that goes around the HL7 Australia products, if you will. Where at the moment, underneath the board, there is the firework group, which is the overarching group, and both technical design groups that exist are technical subcommittees underneath those groups. So we do sit underneath the firework group, and we work on projects. Projects are the pieces of work that are being undertaken. They may correspond to a specific output, like a fire implementation guide or a V2 specification, but sometimes projects are actually exploring a particular topic. Don't quote me on this because this is not, an agreed thing, but in one of the things Sparked is looking at is reason for encounter. And a reason for encounter project might be undertaken to look at where and how should reason for encounter be supported, taking in the inputs from the clinical design group who is looking at that. And that wouldn't necessarily, I think, be a fire implementation guide in and of itself, but it might end up saying there are things that need to be put into or changed in things like the AU base fire implementation guide, and maybe the AU core fire implementation guide, and maybe the AUE requesting fire implementation guide, and potentially patient summary if it exists. So while we don't have them now, there are also the kinds of projects that are about identifying necessary changes and having other existing artifacts address those. So that's more of a future thing. And I just will do a quick call out there for the V2 work group. It doesn't quite exist yet. The V2 work group is silent. If anyone is really interested in standing up and running a V2 work group, please get in contact with HL7 Australia. And I'm sure they'll be very happy to talk to you about doing that. And lastly, there's this slide, but I think we can probably skip past that one, and I'll go into that another time if there's interest in this group to understand how projects are stood up using project proposals and scope statements and how that governance works in the background. Just skip past that for now and go to our ballot reconciliation content. So this is a quick update. We are in ballot reconciliation period. So sign-ups closed. We have the numbers of the people who signed up, which is 77. And the actual balloting period where people submit their feedback and votes has also closed. And so we've got the numbers there below in the orange. These, of course, haven't changed from the last one, but just a quick update for those of you who didn't make the last TDG, that 31 have voted affirmative, 19 have voted negative, as in there is some piece of feedback that is provided to us to consider that they think is of sufficient concern that it should hold up publication of R1 until we've addressed it. 2 have abstained, and we had 25 people who weren't able to complete the vote. And I think HL7 Australia will be undertaking some work to look at how they can support people who have signed up to vote but haven't been able to complete the vote. That's actually that's relatively low numbers for HL7 Australia, and we've got similar across AU base and across the ballot for AUE requesting that also have something like 30%, I think, of people who put their hand up who are unable to, or essentially didn't complete a vote. But back to our total actually numbers. So 108 different pieces of feedback have been provided, and the AU Core co-chairs are going through and triaging those now. We've done early triage on 40 of those in terms of identifying what are technical corrections, what are change requests, and preparing the preliminary reconciliation packages to come out to the technical design group to consider. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to consider those and discuss and then make some decisions about what changes, if any, will we make to AU Core R1. So we've got some links there, which is to the ballot homepage, which provides you a link to all the pieces of feedback that have been raised, and also the link to the co-chair triage page, because everything and all decisions we're taking are fully available on Confluence. So let's get on to ballot reconciliation. As I email around, this is the list of items, and these were around the observation profiles for pathology result observation and diagnostic result observation. Now, we put forward and said we can look through 6 of these, but since then I've been advised that actually a bit more technical investigation needs to be undertaken on this one at the bottom. So that's pending a conversation with the Fire IG tooling folks, actually. So we won't discuss that today until the results of that investigation are back for us to consider. Okay, so let's go through these 4. And what we're going to do is open up each of the issues, have a look at what piece of feedback has been provided. Hopefully everyone has had the chance to review these, review the proposed disposition, and consider whether or not they're happy with the proposed disposition, or whether or not they have any questions or things that they think we need to look at further, or if you disagree and what should be different. So that's what we're about to do now. So let's tackle the first one. Just going to show that now if that link works. So this is the first piece of feedback, and this was raised by Heath. I'm not sure if Heath is on the line. Yes, you are. Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Then did you want to talk through this issue instead of me doing the talking through? Okay, I'll start talking.
It's been on mute.
Oh.
Sorry, I was talking.
Oh no, okay.
But also getting orientated. So basically, I looked at the profile a little bit closer this round, and I guess to some extent partly with some of the conversations that have been happening around e-requesting, but also my background around HL7 pathology, HL7V2 pathology results and things like that, that I didn't feel that some of these elements were commonly reported across various sectors. So things like notes is usually there's a note at a report level, not necessarily on an individual value level, so equivalent to the OBX in a V2. And similarly, methods, I can't say that I've actually seen a method associated with a lab test ever, or at least in very specific cases, and that if anything, will be reported within the code of that particular test, and also identifiers. I guess moving towards a more fire orientated view of the world. Not to say that you can't use identifier, it's just more about linking it back to the request. Is probably more likely in a fire-orientated manner. So rather than doing, I guess, logical references through identifiers like we used to do in V2 land. So I was basically recommending that we remove MustSupport on these 3 items at this early stage, and consider consider those as more optional mays. Yes.
So let's go to the profile and just do the quick what that looks like. I think that's big enough for everybody, is it?
Yep.
Okay, so it's this element under consideration to remove essentially the obligations, the MustSupport and obligation in AU Core, and down to...
And keeping in mind, this is actually at an OBX equivalent level, more so than at the OBR sort of report level. So yes, we would probably still have identifiers at a report level equivalent, but not on an individual value level. So that was the rationale of removing item at this level. So we might have a panel or something or other. We haven't got there yet, but whether it's diagnostic report or a observation that represents the panel that then has members, but at this, I don't know what's the right term, at the analyte level, down at the individual value. So we don't necessarily identify that value. So, yep. And then method element here, and also note. So at an individual value or result level.
So it was 3, wasn't it? Yes,
Yep.
it was those 3. Okay. All right. So I guess we should open that up then for conversation on whether or not, does anyone actually use these elements? Daniel, your hand's raised.
Raise it before you asked, has anybody used them? I have come across these frequently in the past. I acknowledge that a lot of my experience has been international rather than just in Australia, but even working for QH for a short time with their AusLab integration with IMR way back in the day. The issue is to do with, for me, to do with identifier. The other 2 I agree with Heath, and I've made a note on the other recommendation that Heath has made for removing identifier for diagnostic result observation, and it goes like this. What we're doing here is creating an interoperability specification. And so if there is any need to ever have a source system updating an individual observation, which is a common scenario, then if we take out identifier from MustSupport, then the only way of realistically doing that is if they have knowledge of the fire ID. So in the case where we have a system that is not native fire, but goes through an integration engine to connect to a fire system, they won't have knowledge of the fire ID. And yes, you could do a search for all items in a report, try and identify the right observation, but that would be risky and considerably more complex. So in that scenario, which I think is a fairly common use case for the next 5 to 10 years until everybody natively supports fire, there is a need to be able to, I believe, individually change and update the results of an observation, or things like microbiology, where you've got a series of preliminary bits of information and you've got a malaria test and you're defining the species and so on and so forth. So the second scenario, which I believe is going to be a common scenario in the future, is in a health information exchange or a multi-fire server situation, where you have copies of an observation being made in a more central system, which will have a different fire ID. So the ability then to try and track an update of an individual observation resource from the source system gets to be almost impossible. So on those two scenarios, I believe they're realistic. I believe it therefore is important to maintain the identifier.
Okay. I'll just ask Federica, is your comment in relation to what Daniel had said? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I'm talking from an HL7v2 perspective. So again, as Heath said, in V2 we don't really have an identifier, and the way we receive ORU messages with regard to the OBX, there's no specific identifier per se. So for us, it's usually a combination of elements which are required and optional. So it's up to the system that is ingesting the information to come up with what we call a business identifier. And it's not something that the original system would know about. It's something internal. So we do tend to map that concatenation of specific fields, which make it unique, and you can constantly update information by. Really, we keep that internally. When then it comes to using FHIR and writing, updating through the write capability, then you would be using the ID of that resource, probably not the identifier, as I think the identifier is more for internal proprietary purposes. So I would agree that it can be optional.
Thanks, Federica. And Andy?
I was just going to note that we haven't really talked about the encapsulating report and the workflow of that report. I think we've got to be quite careful about basing all of our decisions or having a significant driver of V2 in the structuring we do of this, because I think we're going to have a number of different versions of the reports that may get generated, individually modifying observations within reports. All of that has a whole bunch of other semantics and stuff. So I just don't think we have enough clarity around the rest of that kind of universe at the moment and I kind of support what he's saying, that until I think we do have more prescriptive requirements, that we should lean more towards less rigidity than more rigidity around this.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And back to Heath.
Yeah, so I guess just a quick rebuttal, I guess, back to Daniel's first thing. We're talking about it, though, and I think Federica also represented it quite nicely. It's at that, say, total cholesterol level. Now, we don't have an identifier at total cholesterol, LDL, HDL. We have it at the panel level. So what we're talking about here is effectively at that total cholesterol level, and that's where I don't think we have a unique ID. What I've kind of said there is that we actually need to have a based on or something like that that will then have the identifier on it. That's kind of the rationale here, and so I also agree with Andy's point that we probably less is more at this point in time, that we don't want to be too over rigid.
Thanks, Heath. Can I ask, is anyone interested in retaining, and if so, why, MustSupport and obligation on method? Because we've really talked about identifier there, and there is more than one opinion on it. And before we come back to that and kind of form up what the decision might be across this particular piece of feedback, I just want to check about method. If so, hands up. Otherwise, I think we're all going to say that's equivalent to everybody on this call saying no, remove it. All right. What about note? So the ability to put a note next to a specific result, like LDL or HDL.
I think it's useful. I just don't think it's something we could standardize just yet. because it could mean it would have a lot of different meanings. It might just be a technical problem with that sample, and you're trying to indicate hemolysis or lipemia or something like that. But it might also be some sort of interpretation on that result. And I just think those things live in different places. So until we standardize it and we understand it, I don't think we need it.
I would caution against thinking AUCOR will standardize exactly what that means. I don't think it will. I guess what we're doing is talking about the capacity to hold that. And there are different interpretations of what that might be. And in the past, we have considered that, I think there was someone put it in the chat, on other resources to be risky in some senses because you don't know what will go in there. But at the same time, there is the other argument that it could be really quite crucial. So where we want to land in R1 on not putting MustSupport and obligation on it and wait and see, or do we want to put MustSupport and obligation on it in R1 and then see if that is actually something we need to walk back later? So maybe I'll ask, who's in the for note, keep note with MustSupport and obligation, meaning if you populate it, if you have a note. Okay, so far we've only got one person popping their hand up. So use Zoom reactions if you are interested. Okay, we've got a few more coming in. So that's 5 people, no, 6 have indicated that that is something that they think is actually relevant. Would any of you be happy to talk to why you think notes should be included?
Oh, sorry, I got it wrong then. No, for me, it can be optional. It should be optional. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Oh, I thought you were going to remove it totally. I think it's good there to be optional just in case someone wants to use it. And then because it would be in the contract between the consumer and the provider as to what they would put in there.
I think that's what we're talking about. So it's going to stay optional anyway. AUCOR won't prohibit it. But what we're saying is there an obligation on the responder to populate the note if they have it?
No, it's optional. It would be optional. It's up to you whether you fill it or not. Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, we would be removing that obligation from AUCOR. AUCOR would be silent on note if we do that. Yep. All right, so then it really does come back to identifier then. Everyone seems to be in agreement on method and note and on identifier. Is this sufficient? Are we comfortable to put that to a vote to remove MustSupport and obligation across all 3, and we'll take that decision based on what the vote is? Any objections to that? If that's the case, then can I have someone motion to remove MustSupport and obligation of those 3 elements in this profile?
I'll motion it, but it's different to it. But that's the resolution is saying to retain node. So are we changing this resolution?
We are, yes.
Okay.
That was the original proposed one. So this would numbering, move from identifier, method, and note elements. So yes.
So this is basically persuasive without mod.
It is.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
So Heath, you're happy to motion?
I'll motion that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy to second that, Danielle.
Okay, Federica seconds. So I'll pop up the poll now. Just have to get that working. Many things are open on the screen. I will continue to try to get that poll back. There we go. That's the vote for that current motion. If you're a dial-in, feel free to just call out your name and what your vote is, whether you're affirmative, negative, or abstain. Okay, we've still got a few more people to vote, but I'll count that down. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and I'll share the results. So what we have are 23 people have voted affirmative, 3 people have voted negative, and 15 people have voted abstain. That motion is passed. We will be removing must support and obligation from those 3 elements in the AU Core Pathology Result Observation profile. Okay. I will just save that. When we have the minutes updated to link to, this will change. So let's go back to our next one. So this is a pretty similar one, but it is on the Diagnostic Result Observation profile. And I'll pass over to Heath to talk about these elements.
Can you just scroll up to the title again? Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yep, this one.
Yeah, okay, same deal. I think we're now just looking at the diagnostic result observation. So different profile, same argument, but this time we've got reference range and interpretation. But given that these are not pathology results, that they are more general diagnostic results, I've added those 2 elements into this list of items that should be removed as must support. Just a correlation to other profiles. US Core do not have any of these in their equivalent profile as must support elements either. So yeah, same arguments for identifier, note, and method, but in interpretation, reference range, I consider them only relevant to pathology results and hence not in this particular profile, which is more general.
Okay, thanks, Heath. Let's just go to that profile. Which is this one here, the diagnostic result profile. And it, again, has those elements as must support and obligation with the same obligations of populate if known or no error. And so that is identifier. It is, as we come down, interpretation, note, all the reference range elements. So that's reference range and the low, high, type, and text. Is there one more?
The
No.
method was above.
Oops, I missed that, sorry. And method is proposed to remove any obligations from AU Core on those elements.
And just to, I guess we're not saying that you can't use them. It's just that they're not ones that we're dictating that if you've got it, you have to provide it. So certainly understand that there are diagnostic scenarios, perhaps audiology, for example, where you might have a reference range or you might have a interpretation, but there are definitely other diagnostic ones where perhaps that's a little bit more subjective, so that we don't have those sorts of things. So we're trying to cover must support across multiple settings here.
So this is, I think, to paraphrase Heath, a suggestion for a conservative approach to putting obligations on these elements in R1, and then if we, through implementation and further evidence, discover we need those, they can come back to AU Core in a future release if necessary.
Or a downstream IG if we do.
Exactly. Yes. So let's open that up. Any questions or any comments on these elements and this proposal? Federica.
I agree again with Eth. From experience, product on the side of the ditch, and in what we see in the US, many of those fields actually are not available. They're not processed or ignored. Funnily enough, reference range is not something that we get often. So yeah, enforcing it, it's not the best thing to do. Let's go for a more conservative approach. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Federica. Brett?
I'm a bit concerned just with things like audiology and ophthalmology and any measurement-based reporting from other diagnostics. And yeah, so I kind of, I'm feeling like if you have it, you should populate it. But then again, if it's not typically being shared through B2 reporting, I imagine it's not really available, even though it may actually exist. So it's, yeah, I think it's fine for now to kind of remove reference range, but it's, I think it will come back again in the diagnostics report IG in the future somewhere.
Okay. Is there anyone who this would cause a problem for if this information wouldn't be shared? Okay. If there's no further questions or comments, I think we can move to a motion on this. Okay, Heath, you'll move. Would anyone like to second that?
I'm happy to second it.
Thanks, Federica. I will get that vote back up. Okay, please vote on that motion. Okay, lots of votes coming in thick and fast, which is great. Just a few more to go. All right, I'll count down now from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and share the results. So we have 21 people have voted affirmative, 3 people have voted negative, and 17 have voted abstain. So that motion passes. For those who voted negative, are there any comments that you want to recorded in the minutes?
It's Michael Osborne. I voted negative purely for what Brett said. Basically, if you've got reference range, you should send it.
Okay. Okay. I'll stop sharing that. Okay, so that's the second one. Thanks, everyone. So let's get on to another one. So we have this third one from okay. So what we have here is the issue's been raised, and I think that's Heath again. So I'll pass that to you, Heath, to talk to.
Okay, so specimen has member, that'll be optional. Can you, it is, specimen has member has.
I think it was the fact that the reference field, the actual reference to the downshifting was actually MustSupport, and you're saying that it may not be a reference, but it could be some other field in the reference.
Ah, okay.
It's the cardinality, yeah,
yes.
of this.
Yep. All right. So has member and specimen is the other one. Is that right? So
this this is, yeah, just to what I'm showing now on the screen is that the diagnostic result observation. So there are, just to qualify, there are 2 profiles in AU Core who have cardinality constraints on them on the reference data type. Those 2 are this one. This is diagnostic result observation. So for has member, there's a cardinality constraint here that makes use of the reference element mandatory. And in pathology result observation, it's the specimen element that has reference as mandatory.
Okay, so we're dealing with both profiles in this one card, are we?
You raised them both in one card, so
I think it was both. I think if you just scroll up in the thing, I think it was in there as well.
It's only
is it?
I think if you scroll up.
Oh, my mistake. Sorry, because I saw it on the screen. I thought that was actually about the 2 profiles, but it's actually both of those are in pathology. Sorry about that.
Yep.
So this is now the pathology one, and coming down, of course, we can see that specimen.
Yep.
There's that reference, and then we come down to has member, and there's that there. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, basically we're dictating already that you have to have a literal reference here, and I guess I'm not sure that we're got enough implementation experience yet to say that we may not use logical ones. In other words, using the .identifier element, a sub-element, and there may be some use cases where that may be required for things like specimens and what was the other one? The specimen and
has member.
Yeah. So maybe having thought about this a little bit more, but the has member might be a bit special, but certainly a specimen, if we've got business identifiers and things like that, and we actually don't have a FHIR representation of that, that is a use case for using .identifier, because we can still at least identify the specimen within this resource without necessarily having a FHIR representation of it, etc. So there is a few scenarios here, and as I said, it's really at this point in time, are we being too overly specific by saying you must have a literal reference to another FHIR resource if you're going to represent these 2 members? These 2 elements.
Thanks, Steve.
So what has been proposed for the resolution here
what was proposed is to remove that cardinality, taking yes, that reason that it is possible, and that in principle constraining the reference type as mandatory should be out of scope of AU Core. It needs to be handled by downstream IGs who are talking about exactly how to construct and share this within a particular use case, rather than prescribing this across everything via AU Core. Brett, you've raised your hand.
Just a technical question, because that element's not showing us MustSupport, but is it inheriting obligations from the parent?
No, that's an error. That's an already approved correction
cool.
that just hasn't been corrected. There is no MustSupport or obligation on that element.
Cool. So basically, if we agreed that we reference element wouldn't appear at all, and
correct.
Yeah, would it just be a obligation on the parent? Yeah.
So the obligation is already being removed through a technical correction. Okay.
Yeah.
So this change is purely about removing
cardinality. Yep. Any other comments or questions? Federica. No, hand down.
Instead of lowering hands or muting, brain can't work both ways. Sorry about that. So when
also from a consistency perspective, when we haven't done this anywhere else, this seems to be the only place, and I don't know whether it just was mixed up with the obligation being added here that we did this, but I don't know if there was any specific rationale in making it mandatory in the first place.
No, I'm pretty sure that is an error in the original profile. It's always been mandatory, even before the introduction of obligations. The obligation shouldn't have been put on that element. That was a copy-paste error when adding the obligations through that pull request that needs to be fixed. But it's always been mandatory since we were doing ballot for comment and all the rest of it. Though I don't think it should have been. Yeah, anyway, I'll let other people talk because I'm chairing. Federica.
Thank you. I have a question about reference. Sorry, just as a refresher. Could I use a contained resource without the fire ID in there?
Yes, that's reference is, yeah, reference is pointing to a resolvable essentially to another resource. You would put contained resources inside this thing. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you might also use another way to identify them, like the identifier. If you have a logical ID, you might choose that to do it. But this would point directly, although you actually have to do this, I think, for contained.
Yeah, you do a relative relative reference. Yeah, so you would have a reference to it, but it'd just be contained in the contained element. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now what I'm doing is
Any other questions or comments? Does anyone want us to talk a bit more about this thing we just said about reference or identifier? Federica, your hand is still up. Is that because you'd like us to? No, okay, it's down. All right, so then if there's no other questions or comments, I think we are ready for a motion. Would someone like to motion?
I'll motion that we remove these two references, sub-elements from those two elements.
Okay, so make the minimum cardinality 0. Yes.
That.
And that was you seconding, Federica?
Correct.
Okay, so unless there are any further questions or comments, I'll put up that poll now. And I'm just relaunching now. Okay, still waiting for a few more people. And I'm now going to close the voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I'll share those results. So we have 20 people who have voted affirmative, 0 people have voted negative, and there's 18 who have voted abstain. So this motion passes. So we will be removing the elements, or removing the cardinality constraint so that it's a cardinality of 0, which will effectively remove them from the diff of the profile. Okay, let me stop sharing. Now, Heath, you made mention of there being a separate ticket for the diagnostic result one about has member reference. Since that's the case, we should probably deal with it at the same time, although I don't have that on this agenda. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we happy to go find that and discuss whether or not we should be changing that cardinality on the diagnostic result observation profile now to be consistent?
I'm only guessing that there would be another one. Do you want me to try and find it in the background, or do we?
We can make the decision if in absence of the number and put that decision against that number, or I guess what I'm suggesting is, since I thought, Okay.
Either way, I think we should be consistent. And so if there's a card, then I can find it in the background. But I think otherwise we modify the previous resolution to...
Which we can't because it's voted and completed. So there needs to be a new decision in motion if we want to. Can I ask who's interested? So pop your hand up in deciding whether or not we keep the has member reference sub-element as mandatory in the diagnostic result observation profile. Shall we address that now?
Yes,
Please pop your hand up.
I would like to move that we remove the unnecessary has member reference cardinality 1-to-1 in the diagnostic result observation profile.
Okay, there is enough interest looking at those hands that came up and down to do that. You've moved.
I'm moving it.
Brett?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, great. Does someone want to second that? Second, it is seconding removing the cardinality constraint on has member reference in the diagnostic result observation profile.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Are there any other comments or questions before we move to a vote? Okay, if not, I'm just going to pull that poll up now. Okay. And relaunch. There we go.
So I'm not sure if what is the actual motion? Sorry, because I think
The motion,
I lost sound for a little while.
okay, the motion is to remove the cardinality constraint on has member reference.
On diagnostic result profile.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, still a few more people to vote. All right, I'm going to close that voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and I'll share the results. So we have 20 people have voted affirmative. There are 0 who have voted negative, and there are 17 who have abstained. So that motion passes. So we will make the equivalent change in diagnostic result that we just did on pathology to make that optional, or in fact, actually will no longer appear in the differential of this profile because we're removing the AU core constraint. I'll stop sharing. All right, so we've moved through those. Let's get to the next one. Oh, I've lost my screen of where I was up to there. Let's get back to it. Here we are. Okay, so let's talk about the next one. So this is 46715. This is a different kind of issue. We're going to need to time box this one because there are a few things we need to do at the end of this meeting. But I'll open this now. I say clicking. Here we go. So there is this item. Brett, did you want to talk to this item?
I can. We have obligations. Okay, we inherit MustSupport from the R4 vital signs profiles on the observation component element, that's not an option to talk about because we need to do that as part of our derivation. There are some words on the element definition for the R4 vital signs profile. There are some words saying that the component element is for blood pressure use only, and there is no specific requirement described for responders for any other use. which kind of, to me, mitigates the MustSupport requirements, which are not actually spelled out explicitly in the R4 spec. So what I am proposing is that we, whilst we still continue to inherit the MustSupports as we must, we remove obligations for responder at least, that we don't require populative known by responders, so remove the responder obligation entirely, but we still require a no error obligation from anybody receiving information. So a requester needs to no error on those elements, because they are still MustSupport and may well be populated. Yeah. So yeah, that was my ticket. So it's basically just asking to remove the responder obligations from component and any children thereof. It's challenging, this one.
Comments on this one. So I guess the proposed resolution for consideration is that we consider this for future use, because what we have put into AU Core and has been, I guess, gone through testing is a definition of MustSupport and obligation, and that has applied by default to all elements with MustSupport on them. So this proposal actually changes fundamentally how MustSupport and obligation is considered in AU Core, and would necessitate some kind of reconsideration and rewrite of the conformance section in order to address, which is why it was proposed that we consider that for future use rather than put that right now into AU Core R1. But we're bringing it here for discussion, of course. So what it would change is, for example, in this profile, that it would remove the row for AU Core responder and leave the row for AU Core requester, and the same on these, noting it also changes the blood pressure profile. Because the blood pressure profile, if we interpret the use when reporting systolic and diastolic, then, which is down here,
We have to retain them.
and you remove these up here, which will also necessitate some sort of consideration, investigation on that and how we frame that and what it means.
Yeah, because I think you would be mitigated because you already have MustSupports on your slices for blood pressure, so you still have an obligation to populate them.
But that's not actually what I'm talking about. I guess what I'm talking about is that it changes the understanding of how MustSupport and obligation works, and that we would need to reconsider that. And I think so that's something that has to be taken into account, that this isn't just let's remove, that row. It is a change overall on how that is considered and surfaced in AU Core. So with that being said, let's go to questions and comments.
Seeing that no one else has got a question, why would we remove it only for responder?
Because there's still a MustSupport on it, and if it was populated, I don't want requesters to fall over.
But again, it just inherits from our overarching
True.
MustSupport obligations.
True.
I mean, I know this is a rendering issue and we keep coming back to it. It would certainly clean this profile up if we were to remove these obligations. Especially with the slicing, like I'm just looking at this blood pressure one, it's so, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
I know
we'd still, yeah, we'd still, yeah, for blood pressure, we would still need an obligation on component as well to be retained if we wanted to do it. So we'd have to add that. But yeah, I think it's more like the alternative view is that at the moment you have MustSupports on components for in all the vital sign profiles except blood pressure. You have a MustSupport on a component element that doesn't have any actual definition as to what you must, what if known. I don't know what to populate or how to populate it because it's just a component definition without any detail.
Surely,
So
if you know it, then you would know it.
Yeah. So we're just going to get random stuff in there. That's what that's what. But it's also, I'm not sure we're really wanting to oblige people. See, it's a question of whether you think you do or not. I suppose at that point have components. Yeah.
We've got a hand up from Himak.
Yeah, sorry, I might be running behind on this, but I'm trying to understand what are we removing in this exactly? I'm getting a bit confused. So you're saying you're removing it for responder, the obligation. So are we making it optional to maintain?
No, it's still. So the obligation populate if known is if you have this data and then you populate it. If you don't have it, that obligation doesn't apply to you if you're acting as a responder, as in a response to a request. If you get this information and you're like a client who's gotten it, your obligation is not to error out, basically, and that's the requester's obligation. So the proposal is to remove, and sorry, I've picked the wrong element because it's not on this one. The proposal is to retain the obligation on requesters to not error out if they get anything that is a component, that includes these. But to say that responders are not obligated to populate if they have components except for these in this profile.
Okay, so if we're consuming one of those, let's say systolic blood pressure slices or something, are we supposed to error out or not if we are acting as a requester?
Well, hopefully your system doesn't ever error out. You're not obligated to display it or store it or do anything else other than be capable of handling the resource and doing whatever it is you do with that according to your business processes.
Okay, sorry. I just needed a clarification on this a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. There's a page overall. So that's on the elements on the profiles, but there's a general requirements conformance page, and that talks about what the rules are. And we've currently got that defined about what it means for this, including like what a responder and a requester has to do. Of course, noting we would need to rewrite this and the following section if we go ahead with this action.
Okay.
Heath, your hand's up again. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So I just wanted to perhaps put this in context because just in case people aren't sure on what we're talking about here. So in the case of blood pressure, yes, we were using components, but in theory, you could actually add another component to actually provide additional data about that blood pressure, such as what was the position of the patient when that blood pressure was taken, maybe cuff size, all those sorts of things. So that's what Danielle was showing there on that blood pressure one was that we've still got that component that is not systolic or diastolic that wasn't sliced, that could still be populated. And so there is still a MustSupport on that, still an obligation on that. So in the context of something like heart rate, for example, I know a system that has an additional component on their heart rate that tells us what was the rhythm of that heart rate. So that is a component, and basically as a responder, you know, if you've got something there, you would be somewhat obligated to populate it. And as a requester, you would be obligated to not error on that if you received that element that wasn't just a heart rate value. So that's the context. Hopefully that helps people sort of more contextualize what we're actually talking about here.
Thanks, Heath. Does someone want to find there's a YouTube playlist for all our MustSupport Conformance Fridays that we could drop in the chat, which went through these in a great detail as well. That's probably worth watching on catching up on this. I see, Neil, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just a comment on like just on our implementation, just that for our one, for things like height and weight, where we don't use component, we actually gave it a cardinality of 0 to be really explicit to the downstream system. So.
Yep. And so in that case, of course, this change doesn't affect you because you don't have any. So you have nothing to populate. Yes. Brett?
In an effort to get past this issue, I'm like, I don't know if there's any words we can add to help me, because what I'm concerned about is an implication of requiring to populate the component element where we have no definition as to how to populate it for people that have other material in their vital signs that is not the stuff that we have already constrained. So I don't know if there's a way we can add something to our MustSupport statement, or our use of obligations to somehow mitigate that, because I don't want to put see, at the moment, you could say, oh, well, I don't have it, I'm not going to populate it, and no one will ever know that you really do have components, because there's nothing you named that you need to do. So we can all understand that and go, yeah, that's fine, but I don't want it to come back on someone later as a conformance requirement somewhere, and have it be hauled over the coals for it being something you need to do. And I totally understand the impact it would have on the MustSupport statement. So I'd be happy to withdraw this ticket because it's my ticket. But I would appreciate maybe if there's a sentence we could add to the MustSupport statement that somehow weaken that. I would be interested.
Well, I mean, they're defined by the obligations. So if we're going to...
Yeah.
But that being said, can we put an action on you, Brett, to, I guess, come back to the group with a proposal, whether that's the full thing that means a rewrite, because if that's going to have to be undertaken, what the implications of that and how that shifts all the implications of the standard needs to actually be drafted and talked about and then presented to the group for consideration.
Yeah, I would rather retract than have that happen, because I think we've established this as the approach we want to have. So I would not want to do that at this stage.
Although our resolution is future use, right? So
it is.
Basically what Daniel's asking you to do, I think within the context of our resolution, is let's go and have a look at what that change might be, but it's not going to be an R1.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to accept that. So if people wanted to vote as consider for future use, I can happily come back with some suggestions and we can handle that at a later point.
I think that's the meaningful path forwards. I think there's a legitimate consideration here, but I think that needs quite a bit of work. A bit of and talking through and proposal before that can be incorporated.
Yeah, and I think there's also some HL7 international talk around the MustSupports on vital signs being an issue in different ways as well. So that may play out as well to give more advice. So maybe
hopefully the problem goes away.
Maybe. Cool.
Okay.
That's the best result. Anyway. Thank you. I'm happy.
Okay.
So I move that we consider for future use as per the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a motioner and a seconder for considering this issue for future use. Are there any other comments and questions before we go to a vote on that? All right, I'm hearing none. I will attempt to bring up the meeting poll. All right, the meeting poll, well, not the meeting poll, the motion poll. So to vote to consider this for future is up. Okay, we've only got a few more left. So I'll be closing the voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I've ended that poll and shared the results. So we have 28 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 8 have abstained. So that motion is passed. That goes into our backlog for consideration. And I think we would very muchly appreciate, Brett, you proposing something for us to consider. Okay, so we're going to, that's all the items for discussion today. So we've moved through ballot reconciliation with with also a plus where we talked about the diagnostic result observation. So just to close this up, I just wanted to go, there's a clubbing block vote. So those of you who've been with us through the previous reconciliation, we're going to be releasing some electronic votes. Soon. They will come out. One will come out today. And a block vote is where we've grouped items together for review and voting, and your vote applies across the set of JIRAs in that block. So if you vote affirmative, you're voting affirmative across the entire set of JIRAs. And it's an e-vote that'll come out. And it's probably really important to talk about what e-voting looks like. So let's go to the one that will be out shortly, which is, go to ballot reconciliation, to our ballot for working standards. We have this one, block vote 1. An email will be sent out to this page. You need to be logged into Confluence to vote. And there are instructions here on how you vote. Essentially, you have these options down here. This is what you do if you like ticket that records the vote. I'll undo that. Oh, I can't undo that. I'll need to fix that. And there's affirmative, meaning yes, you agree to what is being proposed here about the resolutions that are in the tickets. You may vote negative. You do not agree. If you vote negative, you need to put a comment as to why. You might abstain. You might also say that, in fact, this needs to refer, we need to talk about this in a meeting. There needs to be further discussion, and you need to call out which issue that is and what needs to be talked about. There's another option, which is to say that you think that one of these issues doesn't belong as part of the block and needs to be dealt with separately. And if you just put a comment on this page saying which issue it is, so for example, you might say that this one, Fire 46945, needs to be addressed separately. If you put a comment at the bottom of the page and say why, I or another co-chair will administrate this and will remove it from the block vote so that we essentially come down to the set of things that are actually voted on. And there's instructions with all of that up above with little diagrams. So that's going to come out straight after this meeting for you to be able to go through and vote on. And then we'll see more e-votes coming through as we've packaged up very like items. And otherwise, our next meeting, which is on the 3rd of October, will be where we discuss the results of that e-vote and anything that's been referred to Telecom. as well as going through some new issues. I'll email them round early next week. And hopefully we get that update from Kylin about the information that came out of the recent CDG Palooza, kind of 2 days. So they're the updates I wanted to give people. We've got 3 minutes in this meeting left. Are there any other items that people need to raise, or do you think or can also be on our next agenda if there's anything we need to talk about there for our next fortnight? All right. If there is anything else, you can also contact me on chat.fi.org or email me. Otherwise, you'll get some emails from me about voting, and I'll see you guys in a fortnight. Thanks, everyone. Great progress through our reconciliation. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.